All right, this should be good. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for coming out here. So, this is Michelle. She is heading up our HR program for Fabio Viviani Hospitality. Yeah, I think you all know me, but if you don't know me, I'm Ken. I run the house operations for Fabio Viviani. And I came out here specifically just to support this because we talk a lot about having an open door policy and having a good culture, but none of that really exists if you don't have a strong foundation and a great aspect of what we do from an HR standpoint. So today you're going to learn how we communicate, how we can make sure that we're all on the same page, and it's a great opportunity to ask a lot of questions and really engage with somebody that you're going to make a connection with. So with that, it's Michelle time.
Thank you so much.
Absolutely.
Sit anywhere. Yeah, sit anywhere. So thank you for traveling out and doing that.
You are
so,
quite welcome.
As Ken said, my name is Michelle Winkley. I'm heading up HR for Fabio. Super excited about that. Thank you for being here at 10 a.m. on what I believe is a very cold morning, because I come from California where 65 degrees is cold. So as Ken said, my name is Michelle Winkley. I met Fabio 9-10 years ago when he had Cafe Bronze. And I did a little bit of work. I get a call every so often to help out. You know, obviously, for those of you who have met Fabio, you just can't help but love Fabio. And then last year, he said, you know, it's really important for me, and it's important for partners like Ben and Jonathan, and partners in his other restaurants, that he really wants people to have a good experience being an employee. We want people to come in and feel comfortable and enjoy being with each other and being in a respectful workplace. And what we were seeing at the end of last year, as you guys all saw right in the news, all kinds of things were coming out that had been happening in workplaces that had never been discussed, right? People were feeling harassed or discriminated against, had been for years, and nobody said anything. And Fabio said, look, my restaurants are great, I think we have a great crew, but I never ever want to have something like that happen in my restaurant. And I want to make sure that we're talking about this and that there's some education around it really. And so he's invested in me to fly me around, to his restaurants to have this conversation. So what I'd like to do today is there is going to be a little bit of me talking, but then I want this to be a little more of a conversation. So let's start with, so how important is it to you guys? How important is respect to you guys? Like on a scale of 1 to 10, where would it? 10. How important is respect to you guys in general? Very important. Very, very important. It's important to us too. So in a workplace, what does respect look like?
Kindness.
Courteous. Encouraging words. Courteous.
Pushing us to the next level.
Oh, that's a good one.
In the company.
Pushing you to the next level. That's actually a really good one. That one hasn't come up yet. What does respect look like? So in a workplace, what is respectful behavior? Communication, for sure. Manners.
Mindful courteousness.
Mindful courteousness. It's like the pleases and the thank yous, right? What about if you have an issue with someone going directly to them?
Mm-hmm.
Anybody can think of anything else what respect looks like? Manners. I love being in the Midwest because there's more manners. What does not respectful behavior look like in the workplace?
Talking down to people.
Ignoring people.
Inappropriate behavior.
What's up? Inappropriate behavior, for sure. Rude gestures.
Not helping other co-workers out.
Yeah, not holding up your end of the bargain, right?
Yeah.
Like
That's like
No
just
teamwork.
everybody instead of just one person,
yeah, letting things that bother you kind of fester, right? Not speaking about them. Putting people down. Gossip, right? Gossiping about somebody. Okay, so we want to make sure that all of that doesn't exist. Okay, so these are definitely the things that we want to avoid, right? So with that, there's a couple of, so that's really where, this is really where we want to get to, right? Is that each of you have a role to play in making sure that you guys are having a good experience here and that we have a respectful workplace. There's also a couple of things that, legally fall into this disrespect. in the news. You've seen a lot, about kind of sexual harassment stuff that's been going on in workplaces, the Me Too movement, the whole thing with Harvey Weinstein. And what happens is, when something happens socially like that, it starts to drive policy changes, and then it starts to drive new laws, and then it affects the laws in employment. And that's really happening to a great extent to various levels in different states. So I also just wanted to talk a little bit about that piece of it as well. So do you guys all know that employers can't discriminate against people based on various characteristics, right? And we work very hard to not do that, make sure all of our managers are trained. Are you guys familiar with what those characteristics are? I'll give you one. I'll start. Age. Gender. Race. What else? Weight.
One's religion.
Weight's not in there yet. I think it's coming. I think it might come under, at some point, disability, physical disability. But it's not there yet.
So disability.
Disability. So we talked about sex, race, religion, color, gender, including gender identity and gender expression, transgender status, national origin, physical or mental disability, protected medical condition, genetic characteristics, marital status, registered domestic partner status, age, sexual orientation, citizenship, and military service or veteran status. It's a pretty long list. It's 3 slides. It's 3 PowerPoint slides. And the reason that I bring this up really here is part of having a respectful workplace is not only the company being careful around these things, but it's the jokes we make, right? It's the visual things that we put up. These are kind of the list of things that are off the table, right? That we shouldn't be joking about, using as nicknames, et cetera, et cetera. So that's kind of what we're asking for help with. I just want to give you an idea of what discrimination and harassment is, right? So when someone says, you're harassing me, and someone says, no, I'm not, here's kind of the definition. So for discrimination, you guys want to take a guess at what discrimination is? Height. Height. Yeah, I mean, you can't discriminate based on height. So discrimination is making a decision about someone not based on who they are, but based on something like height. I am 5 feet tall, sometimes this happens. Or any.
It's too high.
You gotta love the step ladders at that point. But it's making a decision based not on what the person is, but based on something about them. So any of those things that I read, if you're making decisions about someone based on those, that's called discrimination, right? We don't discriminate. We take steps to make sure we don't discriminate in things like hiring, shifts, pay, all of those things. We ask, to make sure that nobody trips over that as well, like within your peer group. We all kind of know there's two types of harassment. One we've seen in the news lately. One's real easy to understand, right? It's the this for that. It's the Harvey Weinstein. It's the if you don't sleep with me, you don't have a job, or you're not going to get an increase, or whatever it is. The other one is considered what's called a hostile work environment. And really what that means is that there's something going on kind of in a sexual nature that is unwanted by the receiver. So it's not necessarily what you intend. So if someone's telling, an off-color joke and they're just intending to get a laugh, but someone else finds it very unwanted, it's how it's perceived.
Yeah.
And that's a little bit harder to deal with, right? Because we all have different sense of humors. We come from different cultures where different things are okay and not okay. And that's kind of where, when I talk about harassment, sexual harassment, but harassment in general, that we want to make sure that we're all doing the best, that what we're doing is not unwanted by somebody else. Make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so any questions on any of that?
I actually do. If we were to, just in any workplace, if there was a certain type of harassment and your managers, the people above you, did nothing about it, what would you say is the best step so that you don't risk losing your job because people do have bills.
Yeah, 100%.
But what do you think is the best way to go about that and still be professional?
Right. So nice of you to ask that question. It's usually later in the presentation, but since you brought it up, so here, I could talk for here, and then if you want me to talk more generally, I could do that too. But Fabio, Ben, Jonathan, Ken, everybody takes it so seriously that you have many people to talk to. So you can actually go to Fabio if you have to, You can go to any of the managers. So if you go to like your direct manager and nothing's happened, you can go to Ben or Jonathan. You can go to Ken directly. There's also a SurveyMonkey link. Do you guys know about the SurveyMonkey link?
Mm-mm.
I'm gonna have to get this redistributed, but Ken set up a SurveyMonkey, and it goes directly to him. It does not go to anyone else, and you can actually post there anonymously. And then you can call me as HR, and I'll make sure that all of you get my email and phone number. So I would say if you don't feel like it's being taken seriously, obviously a variety of things can happen, the outcome of an investigation or a complaint or a concern.
Right.
But if you don't feel like you're being heard, you have multiple avenues.
Right. Okay.
And that's why, quite frankly, they're investing. I mean, they're flying me all over the country to have these chats, and this is why, is because they want to make sure that you guys feel like you have multiple avenues, because everyone feels comfortable talking to somebody different. The other piece of this is we don't allow retaliation. The one thing that will get you fired on the spot is if you retaliate against another coworker. And the reason for that is because you have to feel like you can say something in good faith. As long as it's a good faith concern, we will not stand for retaliation.
Okay.
So does that answer that?
Yes, it does.
Any other questions? Thank you, though, because it just moves my presentation along.
So can we try something? Can we do an activity together?
Sure. Okay. So the reason I do this is because part of what is going to be okay and not okay for you guys is how this group views it. And so I like to do this because it gets all of you on the same page of what's going to be okay and what's not. There are 8 scenarios. We're going to read each one and then decide if that behavior is red, shouldn't happen at all, yellow, it's iffy, or green, totally fine. So because of my amazing cough, I'm going to ask you guys to read. So who wants to start with the first one? Thank you.
While at work, Nina frequently makes personal phone calls to her friends. Her conversations are loud and generously sprinkled with foul and obscene language. Her coworkers in nearby cubicles cannot help but overhear her conversations.
Thank you.
Red.
Red.
Say yellow.
You're going to say yellow.
Yeah.
I'm gonna say red just because it's like you can't avoid.
Right. What do you guys think?
Red.
You guys are going with red? So interesting. When I started doing this, it was all yellow. And then more recently, it's become red. So it's super interesting. And when I did this in Tampa, at the Osteria in Tampa, you're like, you can't be on your phone during work. That's definitely red just to start with.
Yeah.
Right. That's exactly where I was. And then you throw in the foul language and other people not having a choice but to hear it and listen to it.
Okay, so what do you guys think? Red?
Red.
Yellow?
Red.
It's so interesting because this morning they were said red too, and I definitely talked to some people that say yellow. Okay, why do you guys say red?
Just because, I mean, I think personal phone calls are okay to an extent depending on how severe the situation is, how urgent it is.
Sure.
But I definitely think that in a workplace, that kind of language just kind of puts off it's just not very appropriate. It's not professional at all.
Right.
So that's why I say red.
Yeah, it's not the language that bothers us. It's just like, it's being on the phone and like most cases it's busy, and you gotta stay busy or
Yeah.
else.
You can't be on the phone. You can't be on the phone and
For one, cross-contamination here too, like in this specific establishment. If you're on your phone frequently, then you're not doing your job and somebody else is picking up the slack.
Exactly. And when they,
Everyone knows.
kitchen is just a small place, everybody can hear.
yeah.
By the way, I just heard cross-contamination. That's the best answer. Like, literally, germs in the kitchen. That's awesome. I've never heard that. But hey,
Well done.
then it's dirty, and then you're touching food. Oh, good answer.
Who wants to read number 2?
I'll read it.
Thank you.
Robert persists in asking his coworker Maria out to dinner, even though she turns him down each and every time he requests a date. She's told him no. She's told him several times to stop asking.
What do you guys think?
Red.
Red.
Yeah. Right. Undeniably.
Yes. Why is it undeniably red?
She said no the first time, but she just continued.
Not only did she say no, but she said stop asking me.
It's more that she asked him to stop asking.
Mm-hmm.
Just period. I mean, fraternizing network, it just don't work. My experience, it just don't work.
It's complicated, right?
Yeah.
It definitely gets complicated.
Yeah, it is.
So, but yes, he's asked multiple times and she has said to stop. It's an issue if someone continues, right? When you've said no and you've said stop asking, that's it, right? So, agreed. Thank you for that. Who wants to read 3?
Alexander frequently tells off-color jokes during his team pre-shift. Lily is very offended. She doesn't think his jokes are so funny. Alexander said publicly many times his jokes are all in fun and he doesn't intend to offend anyone.
Red with streamers on it.
But he doesn't mean anything by it.
Yeah, but someone who may not be somewhat, I call it ear hustling, someone can be passing by.
Yeah.
And you're like, gosh, said that, and, you know, they could take it offensively and someone else could.
Which is a really good point, right? So it is red. Again, it goes back to the point I made earlier. It doesn't matter what you intend with your off-color jokes, it's how people take it.
Right.
And the thing with this that you have to be careful about is, look, when we're all in a group, it's natural that you don't want to be the one to raise your hand and say, I don't find this funny. So sometimes when you're in a group and nobody finds it funny, but everybody's laughing, because you just don't want to be that person. And so if you guys hear, I mean, this is why people can't say off-color jokes and then say, oh, but everybody laughed, clearly it was okay. If it's off-color, if it's not appropriate, it's just not appropriate. It is red. So there's a couple things about this. One, if it's an off-color joke, if it's anything about that list that I gave you, it just shouldn't be said. 2, it depends on how the person perceives it. So even though he doesn't mean anything by it, it's really how people are perceiving it. The third thing is, what sometimes what people forget is, even if it's said in a group, let's say it's said in this group, and you guys are fine with it, but I'm walking by, because, you know, we're not out at a bar, right? We're working, but it offends me, then it's still not okay. And so there's certain topics, and off-color jokes I didn't really define here, that just shouldn't be said in the workplace. So it's kind of a 3-level red. All right, number 4.
Jaden came into work wearing a new jacket. Jose noticed and said, nice jacket.
I think that's green.
It's green.
It's encouraging. Makes, you know, it's not an innuendo of any kind. So I think it's appropriate.
Green.
It's green.
It was a friendly compliment.
Exactly, yeah.
Friendly compliment.
I put this in here, and usually it's later in the list, because people look at me and they're like, you can see they sit there and like, how is this not okay? Like, because all we've been talking about are things that are not okay. So I really put it in there to truly say, you know what, we are going to be nice to each other, right? We are going to say nice jacket, or nice haircut, or oh, you got a new pair of shoes. I see you on comments. So we're still going to be nice to each other. This isn't about, we're not ever going to speak to each other or connect as people again. There are lines, right? Yes.
In a different tone, that same sentence could be.
Okay.
100%.
Yeah.
100%, and that's the other thing.
Nice jacket.
Wait, one of those?
Right, make your point.
Got it.
Absolutely. No, absolutely. All of those things definitely go into it. Who wants to read scenario 5 for me?
I can. Dan is 10 years older than most of his coworkers. His coworkers regularly call him Gramps. He usually chuckles and moves on. He has never asked anyone to stop calling him that.
It's yellow.
Yeah, yellow.
You guys think?
Yellow.
I say red.
I said, you guys in the back there are kind of quiet,
I mean, he's never asked anyone to stop calling him that, so
right?
he could be okay with it.
He could be.
It might be.
I'm gonna go yellow.
Yellow.
Depends on how Dan feels about it.
So-
I mean, I think it is borderline discriminating based on age. But at the same time, if he doesn't express that he's not okay with it, that's why I choose yellow on this one.
I'm sad for Dan. This makes me sad for Dan. Be nice to Dan. Be nice to Dan.
He chuckles and moves on, so I don't know if. I think it's something that you kind of would have to say, hey, does this bother you when we say this? Because if he doesn't, you know, closed mouth don't get fed.
Right.
So if you don't speak on it, then nobody knows if it's really upsetting you. But I think it's just something like I personally would never just be like, oh, hey, Gramps. Like, I don't,
Right.
you know, that's just not me. But
So this is an interesting one. I would say red for a couple of reasons. And it's hard, right? Because in restaurants, and particularly in kitchens, you tend to have nicknames. So my rule of thumb is if the nickname has something to do with that long list that I gave you, don't use it. But nicknames I know are terms of endearment in general. So first of all, this goes to age, right? It might not offend him, but I could be just as old. And so people noting that someone is old might actually bother me. Someone called me old the other day accidentally. They said, oh, you should go talk to this person. She's a bit older. She's like 50. And I said, yeah, I'm right there. So if you think that person's old, like, what are you saying about me? I'm right there. So he didn't mean to call me old, but he kind of called me old. But the other thing about this is sometimes, and it's just a human nature thing, you don't want to be the person that says, you know what, I know you guys mean this nicely, or, you guys find it funny, but I don't. So just because somebody is chuckling, especially more in a group, it doesn't always mean that they're actually okay with it. Mm-hmm. It may just be that they don't want to be that person that is the one that calls something out. So you have to be a little bit careful with that. I would say it's red just because it goes to age in general, but I actually put it in there to realize sometimes people chuckle, but yet they're still not okay with it because they just kind of go with it, right? Okay, scenario 6.
Andrew just gave a presentation to the executive team and felt that it did not go well. When she passed John in the hallway, John said, no surprise, you screwed up again.
Red.
Red.
Why is that one red?
He's putting her down.
Yeah, it's just disrespectful, right? This doesn't have anything to do with like any list of covered characteristics or harassment. It's just rude.
Is he like a brother or something?
It's red, right? I mean, you guys both said red. Why? There's no covered characteristic there. It's just rude.
Condescending.
Tones. And
Because it could be a friend being like, no surprise. And then, it would be that kind of like, oh,
It
no,
could be
that
that.
sucks.
It's
So-
still red. Fine print behind something that doesn't exist.
Guys.
In no way can you spin positively. No surprise you screwed up again. You can't put that in a way where it's supportive and positive. There's
No
nothing about
surprise
that.
you screwed up again.
You're a failure.
I had some dating friends.
scenario 7.
Sarah's slightly tipsy, and she's leaving the holiday party. She gives everyone a hug goodbye. Everyone hugs her back.
Yellow. What do you guys think?
I think it's just green.
I'm gonna say red.
Hugs are tricky because I'm a hugger, but some people are not about it and they're too polite to say anything. So I
Well,
don't.
it's red. She's drunk. She shouldn't be hugging everybody.
I think I would agree because these two sentences don't say she's drunk. You need to read into it.
Yeah, I say what makes sense. I mean, it could be a friendly hug between them, but someone else
This
is
is an
in
interesting
it.
conversation. So we have a red over here, we've got green up there. You'd say
I
yellow.
think I've been between on it too.
If you create a storyline behind any one of these that are not
Like
bad, they could be
Sarah woke up this
bad.
morning.
Yeah, she woke up with the intention to get drunk to go to the holiday party so that she could hug the guy that she likes, but disguise it because she's drunk. Like, no, the 2 sentences just say she got drunk and gave her a big hug and they hugged her back. That's chill.
I say green.
By the way, I'm going to be contacting you to write my scenarios going forward. It's a little situational. I would tend to go green in this because, by the way, I wrote this out in December when, I got calls about a variety of things that happened at a variety of holiday parties. It's a holiday party. It's probably a one-time thing. There's nothing here that says it was like inappropriate or weird hugging. It was kind of a festive thing. So I think unto itself it would probably be green. I think if someone came in and hugged everybody all the time, every shift, we might then go into this yellow of not everybody likes to be hugged and you're not close with everyone. But the one-time holiday party, one-off is probably green.
Okay.
And then the last one, number 8.
George attracted Cindy, a new employee at his firm. He asked her out to dinner and she politely declines. George is disappointed but does not ask her out again.
Green.
What do you guys think?
Kind of yellow. It's always sticky when you deal with like peer,
Yes.
asking peers out.
I think it's yellow because it's at work, but he asked her and she said no, and they went on with their life, so it's like not that big of a deal compared to who's the other guy, Robert.
Yes. Any other thoughts?
I'm gonna go green.
You're gonna go green. Ken's not gonna say anything yet.
No, so
I like green or yellow.
Yeah.
And it, but like you said, it's one dimensional, so depending on, the rules and guidelines of your employer, if there's a strict code about no dating inside the employment, then that's gonna make it a red, like it's not okay.
Right.
It also doesn't say that Cindy was offended, or that they never spoke again.
And she politely declined.
Yeah.
And
Definitely
he
calling
didn't do it again.
I think there's like the work relationship between them two, if there's any hierarchy there, definitely could make it a red. If George is the boss, or the owner, then it's
Oh
like.
yeah, that totally changes.
Yeah.
You just got brownie points from Ken.
there you go.
Yeah.
There you go. Did she leave this in because it gets me every time? It says a new employee at his firm, which makes it sound like he's in a position of power. And if he is in a senior position, he should not be dating anybody. It is not red. Huge red.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a little bit more pressure to say, yeah, if it's your boss.
Yeah.
100%. Okay. The only other thing that I want to bring up, because I got to do all my retaliation stuff already, is what's considered bullying. So about 4 years ago, you started hearing a lot about bullying in schools. And then in certain states, California being one, not Oklahoma yet, when we do this training, there are certain companies where you have to do this type of training, it was mandatory that you include what bullying is because it was becoming an issue. And again, it was one of those things where what's going on socially, starts to creep in. So, when we were kids, we all knew who the bully was on the playground. Like, it was easy, but how would you kind of define bullying?
Someone talks negative to you.
Someone talks
Condescending.
negative to you. Condescending. Taunting. What else?
It's basically harassing them, telling them,
I feel like it's almost harassment. Like, when we talk about that harassment is kind of based on harassing on one of those things on the list. Bullying is almost harassing, but it's just not based on, it's just based on,
It's just for whatever.
For whatever
like.
reason.
Yeah.
Right. So there actually isn't a legal definition of bullying yet in this way. The way I look at it, it's when someone targets another person and it's really about gaining control of a situation. So in the earlier session today, there were some questions about what's the difference between a bully and like someone who comes in and has a bad attitude and is complaining a lot. Is that bullying? Because, it makes for a bad workplace. And where we fell on is sometimes you can have a toxic person in your workplace. That's not necessarily bullying, right? Because they're not targeting you. They're just kind of, that is who they are. Or they could be a difficult
like
person.
They're just projecting their own bad mood.
A negative person.
A negative person. Or maybe not a polite person. But we do take bullying just as seriously as we take everything else. So I didn't intend that when I wrote it. I wrote it as peers, which I would say is green if it's a one-time, hey, do you want to go out? And someone says no, and everybody moves on with their life, and everybody's fine. Like, it's great. I did not intend when I wrote it the way Ken took it, but I left it in every time just because you like to come to my trainings, but also for this conversation, right?
This is my 6th training with her, and I will tell you, she leaves it in her purse. She can change it at any time. She just does it because she knows I'm going to be like,
Did you feel harassed by this?
I think not feel harassed. I feel supported because it gives me a voice.
There you
go.
Yes, so if there is, and this goes for, when you're in a position of power, right, the relationship, if you're a lead, if whatever it is, the relationship between you and someone who reports to you, and if that's like a direct manager employee, or if it's just someone who, like in a lead position, it changes, right? And you have to be aware of that. So I 100% agree. A manager should not date an employee or someone that reports to them. If it's peers, I'm kind of okay with it. All right, thank you for doing this. I have a couple comments as we wrap up, but any questions, comments, thoughts on any of this? Okay, I appreciate all of you reading. I want to talk real quick. I a half step on bullying. Bullying is something that we started talking about in workplaces maybe 3 years ago, as again, you started seeing a lot of coverage about bullying in schools. And then it kind of came into the workplace as well. And then in certain states, in this one, but in certain states, we actually are required to cover bullying. You know how when you were in school, you always knew who the bully was? There's not actually a legal definition for workplaces of what a bully is, but how would you describe bullying?
Making someone feel apart from.
Yeah, making someone feel like
separate from.
Yes.
Or always criticizing them for the work that they're doing. Oh, that's wrong. Oh, you didn't do that right. Oh, that's not how you carry that. Oh, that's not how you carry that. That's judging them on how they work and stuff.
Probably aggressive person.
Aggressive.
I agree with what you said, but at the same time, I think it comes back to like a tone and backstory of how it's like.
Well, you can tell if somebody's wrong, but if you don't have like a solution to help them, then that's what makes it.
I agree with that.
There's scuffing and being like, oh, this is wrong, what are you doing? And then there's, oh, that's wrong, here's this.
Yes.
So there's a difference between feedback, which is respectful, right? When you give someone feedback, you're kind of giving a gift of yourself because you're putting yourself out on the line to give someone your opinion that they may or may not agree with, right? So honestly, when you give feedback, that's like being very open to another person. Bullying, which is kind of where you guys were going with this, is when, and again, there's no legal definition of it, it's when you're kind of purposely trying to interfere with someone's work. So first of all, the intent is not, I want to help you and I saw this and I want to tell you. It's, I want to make this uncomfortable for you. So it's separating, to your point, and kind of to what you said, it's almost a little more aggressive, right? So the red example on the sheet of the person who walked out of the presentation, that was kind of my bullying example in a way, right? It wasn't, here, let me give you some, what went wrong, let me help you. It was, yeah, of course, of course you did it. And you just are purposely making someone feel bad to the point of it affecting their work. The last thing I wanted to talk about is, so what happens when you do bring a concern up? A lot of people are like, I don't know what happens, so I don't bring a concern up because I actually don't know what goes on. So if a concern comes to me, there's a lot of different types of concerns. You could certainly call me and just say, I'm having problems with a coworker and I don't know how to talk to my coworker. Or I want to go to my boss and talk to them about something, but I don't know how to do that. I mean, from what I can tell, you guys are a great group and you seem, everyone seems really respectful of each other. But something happens. What do you do?
Go to your chain of command.
You can go to your chain of command.
Survey monkey.
You can go to Survey Monkey. How did she say Survey Monkey?
I heard the Survey Monkey.
Another, it's a brownie point day for Kat.
I love the fact that it's used. That's a good thing.
You can go up your chain of command. You can
Does
go
everybody know what Survey Monkey is?
No.
Yes.
See, that's what that's why I decided.
That's why you came today.
Ben, what is Survey Monkey?
Survey Monkey is an online way to give feedback to the owners, the managers, everybody, and anonymous.
Where's that posted?
We will post that in the kitchen for, I think it's kitchen posted, is say they don't know anything about it, correct?
Cool.
Is that this for this job or every job?
This job.
Just this job. And I'll tell you,
I don't know, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
No. It's legit. Just so you know, although it can be distributed depending on content to owners and managers, the first and only person that reads it is me. So if for any reason, for any sort of communication that you have, I am the first person. If I don't feel it needs to be shared with certain individuals, I don't. So, feel absolutely free to utilize it in any way, shape, or form that you do. You can, but if it is something that's more HR related, I would highly suggest that you reach out to Michelle, and she's going to provide you with that stuff.
If there is truly someone calling me saying, I feel like I'm being harassed, discriminated against, bullied in the workplace, what we do is we keep that as confidential as possible, but we do investigate that, which means I ask for what happened. I may then go talk to other people who have seen it so that I get all points of view. We do end up talking to the person who the complaint is made about because everybody has an opportunity to tell their side of a story. Because, humans are funny. Like, you talk to 5 people, you have 6 opinions kind of thing. So it's really important that you get everybody's point of view. And then from there, we determine what needs to happen. And there are a lot of things that could happen. It could be, this really isn't harassment, it was a misunderstanding, and people need coaching on how to speak to each other, or there was personality conflict, and that needs to be dealt with. All the way to someone did something that is absolutely not acceptable in our culture, and they're gone. And many things in between. But first and foremost, what we really try to do is understand kind of from all points of view what's happened. All right, so with that, thank you so much for coming in at 10 a.m. this morning and spending time with me and participating. I super appreciate it. I'll make sure you have access to my contact information. I'm here all day, so if you guys need anything, let me know.
Thank you.
Thank you.